"You're not authorized, sir. And that patch, it looks homemade, like someone stitched it without proper training." The young soldier's eyes barely lifted from his clipboard. His voice carried that mechanical edge, the kind that comes from repeating the same words over and over since dawn broke. Elias Rowan stood motionless, hat clasped in weathered hands, the morning breeze tugging at his coat. His old uniform hung on his frame, carefully pressed despite the years that had faded its color. On his right shoulder, sewn with irregular thread, sat a small patch. Margaret, the name his wife had embroidered with her own hands just weeks before the cancer claimed her. That sleeve had never carried anything else since. One of the junior officers let out a quiet laugh. "Sir, this ceremony is restricted. Military funeral, invitation only. You'll need proper authorization to enter." Elias offered no response. His hand moved to adjust the patch, the other, a prosthetic limb, steady at his side. He stepped back from the gate without protest. Just beyond the entrance, he planted himself. Back rigid, boots aligned, eyes locked on the folded flags rippling behind the iron bars. Disruption wasn't his intention. Goodbye was. If you believe nobody deserves treatment like this, type the word honor in the comments. Your voice carries more weight than you realize. Elias held his ground just outside the black, wrought iron barrier. The sun made its slow climb behind him, stretching shadows long across the gravel surface. His posture remained unwavering, despite the persistent ache radiating through his leg. Even as uniformed personnel in dress blues passed without acknowledgement, a handful of guests presented their credentials and moved through smoothly. One or two cast glances his direction, confusion flickering across their faces, perhaps sympathy, but nobody paused. A photographer adjusted his camera lens and deliberately turned away. Inside the perimeter, white chairs filled in neat rows. Flags bordered the central walkway leading to the ceremonial canopy. A Marine color guard ran through their movements in practiced silence. Elias glanced down at the identification badge clipped to his chest. Nothing modern about it, no digital components, just a worn plastic rectangle holding a photograph from 20 years past, laminated surface cracked with age. His name, his unit, his discharge classification. He extended it once more toward the same guard. The young man refused to even touch it. "Sir, that credential has expired. You're not on the authorized list." "I came to pay respects to a friend," Elias spoke softly. "Name of the deceased?" "General Patrick Whitmore." The guard tapped on a tablet screen. "Do you have a family connection?" "No, I served alongside him 34 years ago." The guard looked up again. This time his expression mixed discomfort with indifference. "I apologize, sir. Without formal authorization, we cannot make exceptions." Elias gave a single nod. "I understand." He stepped back once more and remained. A gust swept across the grounds, causing flags to rattle. The edge of his coat lifted, exposing the dull shine of the mechanical joint in his leg. He pressed the fabric back down gently. One of the officers stationed near the gate leaned toward his colleague and muttered something under his breath. The other responded with a quiet laugh. Elias heard every word. He didn't turn around. Instead, his gaze traveled through the bars once more, through the crowd already gathering near the stage. He'd stood in places like this before, not for this general, but for the others, the ones whose names never reached the newspapers, the ones who received folded flags and half-empty ceremonies. Just quiet recognition and sparse attendance. Ceremony wasn't why he came. He came because memory remained intact, and because somewhere inside that pristine white canopy rested the man who'd bled beside him on a dirt road in Basra. The man who'd whispered through pain, "Don't let them bury me alone." Elias had honored that promise for 34 years. A group of younger soldiers passed by, laughter echoing between them as they tossed an energy drink back and forth. One of them noticed Elias standing in position and stopped mid-stride. "Hey, who let Grandpa escape from the museum?" The others joined the laughter. The one who'd spoken looked closer, pointing at the patch on Elias's shoulder. "What is that? Some kind of tribute or something?" Elias gave no answer. He raised one hand to straighten his collar, then folded both hands behind his back, left flesh right metal, and stared forward. Still as a monument too, revered to gather dust. The sun climbed higher now, carving sharp shadows through the black bars. Inside the perimeter, the service had commenced. Elias could hear the opening notes of the national anthem carried faintly on the wind. That kind of distant echo that straightens your spine instinctively, whether anyone's observing or not. He remained motionless. Not when the honor guard presented arms, not when the first rifle volley shattered the morning silence. And not when the boys came back. The same group of young soldiers wandered back toward the entrance, restless, unsupervised, exchanging glances with each other. One carried a program from the ceremony, glossy paper folded neatly. Another snapped photographs on his phone, casual, grinning. They slowed when they saw Elias still positioned there, still waiting, still silent. Man, one of them muttered, he hasn't budged. That's either dedication or dementia. The others laughed again. The tallest among them, early 20s perhaps, stepped slightly closer. His boots scraped against the gravel. He pointed at the patch again. Margaret, was she your wife? Elias offered no response. She make that for you? He asked, leaning forward. Looks like it came from a pillowcase. Another round of soft laughter followed. Not cruel exactly, but careless. That made it cut deeper. The soldier reached out, just 2 fingers, and tapped the patch like it was a novelty badge at a costume party. The fabric shifted. Elias's hand rose instinctively, not quickly, not defensively, just enough to cover the name with his palm. Then he locked eyes with the young man. Not angry, not sorrowful, just steady. The soldier's smirk disappeared. He stepped backward. Nobody spoke. Nobody intervened. A nearby officer glanced over, witnessed everything, and returned to his clipboard. Across the field, the ceremony progressed. A folded flag passed from one officer to another, words spoken into microphones, cameras clicking in succession, dignitaries nodding in agreement. Elias remained at the gate, unacknowledged, uninvited. A moment later, the group drifted away. One of them muttered something under his breath, another let out a snort. Elias lowered himself slowly onto a low stone ledge near the wall, his legs stiff from extended standing. He placed his hat beside him on the bench. The prosthetic made a quiet metallic sound as it contacted the concrete. He exhaled, a long, exhausted breath, and then reached up to the patch on his shoulder. He unclipped it with careful movements. His hands trembled slightly as he smoothed it flat in his lap, pressing out the creases like it was something holy, because it was. The thread ran uneven, the letters slightly crooked, but every stitch had been placed by her hand, every letter sewn with a hope he hadn't fully understood until she was gone. He stared at it, then folded it once, twice, and placed it gently against his chest. No cameras captured that moment. No one applauded. No one even noticed, except one man. A captain standing quietly near the gate had been observing the entire sequence. His uniform was crisp, bronze star pinned on the chest. He didn't speak, didn't approach. He turned and walked toward the command tent. Elias remained seated, not slumped, not defeated, just still. The folded patch rested in his front pocket now, close to his chest. He kept a hand over it, flesh, not metal, as if protecting something living. The sounds of the ceremony floated faintly from across the field. Muffled eulogies, ceremonial commands, the sharp echo of boots turning in synchronized formation. But out here, outside the gates, there existed only wind and memory. Elias shifted slightly on the stone ledge. His leg throbbed with pain. He didn't reveal it. Instead, he reached down and straightened the crease on his pant leg. He wiped a trace of dust from his prosthetic. Then he picked up his cap and placed it carefully on his head, and he rose slowly, deliberately, back to attention. Nobody commanded him to. Nobody was observing. But he stood as if someone was, as if Margaret might be watching, as if Patrick Whitmore, the man lying in the polished casket 100 feet away, could still see the brother who once dragged him from a burning Humvee under sniper fire in the outskirts of Basra. He remembered how Patrick's voice had broken that night, not from physical pain, but from disbelief. You shouldn't have come back for me. I didn't, Elias had whispered. She told me not to leave anyone behind. He never spoke her name, but Patrick always knew. Elias turned now, facing the flag-draped canopy in the distance. His eyes didn't squint against the light. They stared wide and clear. The breeze caught the hem of his coat again. This time he let it flow freely. And then, with no audience, no music, no order given, he saluted. It wasn't a crisp textbook motion. His right side was metal. The arm moved stiffly, slowly, a shadow of its former precision. But the meaning remained perfect. A salute not to a general, but to a friend, to a promise fulfilled, to a memory never surrendered. At that precise moment across the field, the captain who had watched from a distance stepped into the command tent. His boots were immaculate, his posture upright, but his voice dropped low when he spoke to the man at the center of the room. Sir, he said, careful not to interrupt, "There's someone outside. I believe you'll want to see him." The man standing at the front of the tent turned. His hair was mostly gray now, cropped close to the scalp. Medals lined the left breast of his formal jacket, but his eyes, sharp, calculating, softened as the captain spoke one name: Elias Rowan. There was a pause, then a breath, and then the general nodded. Not like an officer issuing a command, but like a man remembering something he'd been carrying for decades. General Christopher Doyle didn't wait for the protocol officer to announce his movement. He handed his ceremonial binder to an aide, removed his white gloves, and stepped out of the tent with quiet urgency. The honor guard paused. So did the speakers, uncertain what was unfolding. Doyle crossed the main aisle, not toward the podium, not toward the family seating, but away from the ceremony's core, straight across the grass, toward the edge of the gate, toward Elias Rowan. The crowd turned, whispering among themselves. Some stood, cameras adjusted focus. Nobody understood why the highest-ranking officer in the field was abandoning his position in the middle of a military state funeral until they witnessed what he did next. Doyle stopped just inches from Elias. He didn't salute immediately. He looked first, fully, deeply at the man before him, the man with a prosthetic leg, the man whose uniform was pressed but outdated, the man who had stood without permission, without authorization, for over an hour. Then, without a word, Doyle extended his hand, not in command, not for show, but in reverence. "I heard you wouldn't come," he said quietly, "but he made me promise. If you showed up, it had to be you." Elias blinked, the wind brushing across his face. "Had to be me for what?" Doyle turned slightly and gestured behind him. An aide stepped forward, holding a polished wooden box, the urn containing the remains of General Patrick Whitmore. Elias's breath caught in his throat. "He wrote it into his final directive," Doyle said. "Only one man could carry him to rest." Elias's voice was thin, cracked. "I thought they'd forgotten." Doyle shook his head, eyes glinting with emotion. "No, Sergeant, you're the reason he made it to 30, the reason he became the man we're burying today." He paused, then leaned in closer. "And I'm the reason he lived to meet his granddaughter." Elias looked down at the box. His fingers trembled slightly as he reached out. Doyle placed the urn in his hand with care. It was heavier than Elias expected. He looked up. Behind them, the entire assembly was now on their feet. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. And when Elias turned toward the central path, Doyle moved beside him, not in front, not behind, but shoulder to shoulder. Together they walked through the gate, across the field, toward the altar. The military band didn't play. The press didn't shout questions. The only sound was the hush of shifting uniforms and the quiet steps of reverence as soldiers, young and old, stood at attention on either side of the procession. Some saluted, some simply placed hands over their hearts. Elias carried the urn like he had carried his oath, not for recognition, but because it was right. Doyle leaned slightly and said just above a whisper, "I was there, Elias, Basra. I was the second radio operator. You pulled me out too." Elias didn't answer. He just walked. And in that moment, the silence became sacred. If you believe dignity always finds its voice, even in silence, subscribe now. It's how we remember what must never be forgotten. The final stretch of grass looked longer than it was. Elias walked one step at a time, the urn steady in his arms. The breeze softened, the sun pressed gently through the clouds above, bathing the field in muted light. He didn't hear the whispers anymore, didn't notice the cameras, the rows of dignitaries, the brass insignias catching sunlight like medals of silence. All he saw was the casket platform up ahead, the folded flag waiting for its final weight. And beside him, General Doyle walked in silence, matching pace perfectly. Halfway through the procession, Elias noticed them. The same young soldiers who had laughed earlier, now standing at rigid attention, not ordered, not forced. Each of them with their heads lifted, eyes forward. And as Elias passed, one of them, the one who had touched the patch, stepped out just slightly and whispered, "Sir, I'm sorry." Elias didn't stop, but he nodded. And in that moment, the apology carried more weight than the insult ever had. They reached the platform. Elias stepped up, placed the urn on the marble pedestal above the folded flag, and removed his cap. He rested his palm over the urn, then stepped back. No applause, no anthem, just stillness. And then a rustle among the ranks. Veterans in civilian clothes, scattered throughout the crowd, stood slowly. Some raised hands in salute. Others removed their hats. One man clutched his cane and stood without support, legs shaking. A woman in a dress uniform, silver hair tucked under her beret, stood tall and whispered, "Welcome home." Elias blinked, not because of the wind, but because he hadn't expected it. Not this, not ever. The ceremony concluded. A rifle salute cracked across the air. Taps rang out clear and slow, each note sinking deep into the bones of every listener. When it ended, General Doyle turned toward Elias. "I know you didn't want recognition," he said quietly. Elias glanced down. It was never about being seen. "I know," Doyle replied, "but some things deserve to be remembered." 1 hour later, as the last chairs were folded and the guests dispersed, a small group remained near the far side of the cemetery. They gathered around a simple bronze plaque newly placed at the base of an oak tree planted years ago. It read, "In honor of Staff Sergeant Elias Rowan and Margaret Rowan. Because honor is not given, it's carried. No statue, no podium, just truth." Elias didn't speak. He stood beside the tree, fingers brushing the bark. Then from his coat pocket, he pulled out the patch one last time. He bent down and buried it beneath the soil at the base of the tree. A gesture nobody told him to make, but one that said more than words ever could. Doyle stepped up beside him. "They'll come here," Elias said. Doyle nodded. "They already are." Elias turned to go. No speeches, no waves, just quiet steps down the gravel path. This time when people looked at him, they didn't stare. They stood. Because some uniforms fade, but some men never do. If you typed honor earlier, thank you. If you subscribed, welcome. And if this story moved you in any way, remember this. We stand together, even in silence. See you in the next one.